the topic this evening. And one of the ways I think you'll like the topic is because I like the topic. And because it's about Prabhupada. So that should include everybody. But I think you'll see my enthusiasm for this particular topic is contagious. My cough is not, but the topic is. Light of the Bhagavat. Light of the Bhagavat. Does that ring any bells? Yes. Which bell? The bell that it rings is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, I think it's text 43, where the sages, in Chapter 1, the sages of Naimisharanya asked Sutta Goswami 6 questions, Chapter 1. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Sutta Goswami answers. And the last of the 6 questions was, now that Krishna has departed for his abode, where will religious principles take shelter? Because religious principles were sheltered by Krishna. Then he's left. And now that he's left, what's the shelter for religious principles? For this dark age of Kali? The answer is light of the Bhagavat. The poetry is very nice, but Sutta Goswami says, I'll just keep the poetic part nice. Just like at night, on the western horizon, the sun may set. But shortly after the sun sets, the moon may rise on the eastern horizon. And when that moon rises, that's as brilliant as the sun that people in this dark age of Kali can get light from the Bhagavad. Because the Srimad Bhagavatam appeared shortly after Krishna's departure. And that shortly after appearance of the Bhagavatam is as brilliant as the sun. So light of the Bhagavad. So in this dark age of Kali, shelter in religious principles is found. And the highest religious principle is found in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the very second book that Srila Prabhupada wrote during his budding life as a world acharya was this book, Light of the Bhagavat. You want 2 microphones? Okay, it's fine with me. Make me feel important, right? 2 microphones, wow. It's just different sound systems. That's what's going on. Yes. Okay. So as you see, on the right side of the screen there's one of the several covers for Light of the Bhagavat. And this is going to be a description of the journey of leading to Prabhupada's creating this book. And it's a very nice journey. Srila Prabhupada was living as a householder until 1954. And during the earlier stages of his life as a householder, he had children, he had a wife, he had parents, and he was living the life of a householder. However, his wife was not inclined as he was. And he tried gently, and no powerful personality, but his wife was a little stubborn. Here's a nice photograph taken in Allahabad in 1952, where they went there for a posing for a portrait. And right next to Prabhupada's left shoulder, or in the center there, is his father, short, diminutive stature, Gaur Mohan Dey. In Prabhupada's lap, and to the far right side, on the lap of his widowed sister. He had more than one sister, but Rajeshwari was one of his sisters. And Rajeshwari's son is right behind Prabhupada's father, Tulsidas. And then by Prabhupada's backside, that's his wife. So he was trying to encourage. And during those days, printed books were very rare. Mostly books were handwritten. And Prabhupada happened to have a nice copy, not with all the purports, but a copy of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. And, this celebrated its Tirami, and his wife defiantly bartered his Bhagavatam for some tea biscuits. I don't even know what a tea biscuit is, but that was it. And in 1954, at the age of 59, Prabhupada left his family life, Vanaprastha. Now, by this time, his sons were grown up. They could take care of the business. They knew how to run the business. They could take care of his wife. He didn't just leave them in the lurch. But he didn't take anything with him. He didn't take any money. He just left. Disappointed, yet very determined, because he had received instructions twice and then had gone inside, deep into his heart from Bhaktisiddhanta to give the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the English-speaking parts of the world. So there he was in north of Calcutta. He took a train to anywhere, and he ended up in a place that was just a short distance south of, here's what it says, Jhargram. He didn't have a destination, just was Vanaprastha. And in the course of his travels, many obstacles, but somehow he met these two ladies that had a property in Jhansi, and they had named it Radha Memorial, but they wanted Prabhupada to just build a nice temple, a Radha Krishna temple. So he agreed, and you see the big sign on the boundary wall, the League of Devotees, as Prabhupada did when he came to America. In written language, he established and incorporated, or whatever the language is for India, formally registered this society, League of Devotees. Different language, but similar purposes as Iskcon. And in course of time, he came to understand two things. The ladies were tricky, and there was a competitor. And they kind of favored the competitor, although they had already spoken to him that he could develop a Radha Krishna temple. So then they made a condition that he had to complete the construction by such and such date, otherwise he would forfeit everything. And he knew what that meant because he knew business people. So he walked. And when he left Jhansi, he went to Mathura. He carried with him a deity of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because that's Bhaktisiddhanta, his guru, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission, his life and soul. So he, many places he went, but one of the places he went was to Mathura because he had received an invitation from Bhakti Pragya Keshava Maharaj, who was the leader of the Gaudiya Mat in Mathura, in the Keshava Gaudiya Mat, one of the original deities that the great-grandson of Krishna established. And he was the leader there, but he was also, like Prabhupada, very gifted in writing. So gifted in his writing skill, and he was very learned. Keshava Maharaj invited Prabhupada to come help him in Mathura in the editing and publishing of the Gaudiya Patrika. It was a Bengali rendering of Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And around the same time, shortly thereafter, he received a similar invitation from Bhakti Saranga Maharaj to go to Delhi and help him with the printing of the Harmonist, which was in English, also in another version called Sajjana Toshini. So Prabhupada went to Delhi and kind of moved back and forth between the two, Mathura and Delhi, they're not so far. And he was mission-oriented. Bhaktisiddhanta's Mission, these are two publications that were dear to him, and he was invited to assist the chief editors. So when he went to Delhi, all of this information is from Lilamrita. It was difficult. It was difficult in many ways. One of them was the temple was disorganized, and it wasn't clean, and the standards of deity worship were off. And the brahmacharis living in the ashram did what brahmacharis that aren't trained would sometimes do. They would quarrel and quibble, and it wasn't very inviting atmosphere. But he stayed for some time because Bhaktisiddhanta's mission. And here's a little description from the Lamrita. In Delhi, those of you from North India, you know, the winters can be very cold. Abhay was trying to print back the Godhead, so along with helping them with their publication, Prabhupada had begun Back to Godhead, English. In winter's discomfort, he walked through the early morning streets of Delhi to visit Surendra Kumar Jain, the printer, to read the latest proofs. By walking, he saved money. He had no chadar, only a lightweight cotton jacket, and he wore rubber shoes. He also wore a cotton hat that covered his ears and tied beneath his chin, protecting him from the 40-degree, that's Fahrenheit, wintry mornings and the sometimes gusty winds. And then came summer. Summer in Delhi is scorching many times. Summer came in 110-degree heat, made it almost intolerable to spend time out of doors. Hot, dust-laden winds blew in the city streets. Street-side hawkers closed their businesses during the day. In early May, during 112-degree heat, a man collapsed in the street and died of heat stroke. But Abhay ignored the heat and the ordinary limitations of the body. Now let's do a little math. He left the Grahastha ashram when he was 59, and that was 1956. So he's spending 2 years, 54, spending 2 years approximately, add 2 more years to 59, so he's in his early 60s, trying to, the longer term mission is what was given to him directly by Bhaktisiddhanta. At the same time, there's others who are godbrothers, qualified like he is, academically and literary and so forth, to assist them. So finally he decided 2 years later to move to Vrindavan because he thought that would be an ideal place for him to complete his mission, preparing himself to go to the West. And the place where he stayed is a nice place, very simple place. You can visit it. There's a nice little, many of you have read in Lilamrita, there are 5,000 Radha Krishna temples in Vrindavan. This is one of them. There's 4,999 other ones. And there's the outside, and he stayed there for 6 years. And during this time is when he composed many things, but he composed Light of the Bhagavata, you'll see shortly. So there's the front walk-up area. Here's directly perpendicular, seeing the walk-up area. And when you go up those little set of steps and go inside that door, here's what you see inside the door. It's a courtyard with a cow and a calf and a tulsi plant. And on the left side, you see where the altar is. And inside the altar, there's the deities of Sri Sri Radha, Vangshi Gopal. And notice Vangshi Gopal is not holding his Vangshi, because when you make an bhoga offering to the deity, you take the flute away so he can eat without interference of the flute. But it's a nice photograph, very nice close-up photo. And this is the deity that he served and worshipped for 6 years. Now let's take a look at the place where he stayed. The place where he stayed has tall, Indian-style steps going up, 28 steps. Here's the first set. Here's the second set. And here's his room. And this is the place where Prabhupada stayed for 6 years, where I'm going to ask you to keep this image in your mind as we go forward, to see this is where the world Acharya began, envisioning a worldwide Hare Krishna movement when he had nothing. The room was 17 feet long, 9 feet wide, and 10-foot tall ceilings. And the paint job wasn't really great either. No water, no kitchen, no toilet, just 4 walls. Try it. 6 years. It's like Boy Scouts or something. It's very, very simple, austere. So to use the bathroom, he had to go downstairs, which was what the family used, and he shared the bathroom with the family. He shared, he had cooked using a little kerosene burner in his room. And then after cooking, he went downstairs, offered to the deity, so everything was nice prasadam. And he would honor, to bring the plate back upstairs and honor his prasadam in this little room. And you see that set of doors on the right side of this photograph, over here? It leads to a terrace. And you go out onto the terrace, you can look in the back, and you see the river Jamuna. And because this is very near Keshigat, I'll show you a map where Keshigat is shown shortly. So that's the back side. This is the front side overlooking Prabhupada's room through a window. And there's the little walkway leading up to Vangshi Gopal Temple. Here's a map. In the middle is Vangshi Gopal Mandir, and that nice pink pointer. And where it says ancient Sri Yamuna Temple Vrindavan, that's the Keshigat. And right alongside the river Jamuna, and that's where he was residing. And if you look closely, just below, almost below, it says Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami Samadhi, which means that the Radharaman Temple was very close. So while Prabhupada was staying at this temple, the Vangshi Gopal Temple, he made a very close relationship with Vishvambar Goswami, who played an important role in Prabhupada's life and his preaching. Vishvambar Goswami was one of the principal Goswamis of the principal 6 Goswami temples. And amongst them all, he was the most respected. And it was for that reason, 2 things. It was for that reason that Prabhupada requested Vishvambar Goswami to be fully in charge of the deity installation of Krishna Balaram, 3-day festival, because no one's going to question Vishvambar Goswami. And if Prabhupada did, they might. But so he was so respected and so talented, so gifted, and so on. And Vishvambar Goswami had relationships with the other Goswamis. That means the other inheritors of the responsibility of overseeing temples, the Goswami temples in Vrindavan. And not far from Radharaman Temple, was the Radha Damodar temple. And Vishvambhara Goswami had a relationship with the Goswami at the Radha Damodar temple, and he pulled the little strings with that Goswami of the Radha Damodar temple so that Prabhupada could shift from where he was staying at the Vangsi Gopal Mandir to the Radha Damodar temple. It was a relationship arrangement by Vishvambhara Goswami had great affection for Prabhupada and vice versa. So for these 6 years, Prabhupada made Vrindavan his base. He often traveled. His main project, of course, was writing, but he wanted to make connections. He had to make a passage to India, from India to the West. He needed supporters. He didn't have anything. He didn't have anything. He didn't have followers. He didn't have any money. He didn't have anything. So he was printing Back to Godhead magazine, and he was going here and there to enlist subscribers for Back to Godhead magazine. And by doing that, he would get to know the names of people, and those people who were pious and value Vedic culture and Gaudiya Vaishnav culture. So he went to different cities, particularly went to Delhi, but he went to other places. He went to Mumbai and other places and other places. But the attempt to get subscribers for Back to Godhead was one thing, and then the mission of going to the West was another thing. So during this period of time, while he's still residing, like 3 years after residing at the Vangsi Gopal temple, there's Keshava Maharaj. You saw his picture before. There he is in the center. He became the sannyas guru for Srila Prabhupada and one other sannyasi because he kept insisting with Prabhupada, our Guru Maharaj has given you a mission. And for you to fulfill the mission, you should accept sannyas. And Prabhupada was feeling not qualified and all those genuine reluctances. But Keshava Maharaj was very powerful, and so he accepted his encouragement because it would assist him in his mission. Then in July 1962, Gaurachand Goswami, who was the chief Goswami of the Radha Damodar temple, at Vishvambhara Goswami's encouragement, he approached. Vishvambhara didn't approach the Prabhupada. The Goswami of the Radha Damodar temple approached Prabhupada and said, I have 2 rooms in the courtyard and they're unoccupied. Would you like to stay there? And it's very auspicious because just by out the window of one of these little rooms is the Samadhi and Bhajan Kutir of Rupa Goswami. It would be very auspicious for your work. Now they're godbrothers. They're supporting Prabhupada's mission, although he's not well known yet. And so Prabhupada went. He saw the rooms. They hadn't been occupied in a long time. Their condition was really run down. And he estimated it would take 500 rupees to get it inhabitable and something extra for electricity and something extra for something else. So he negotiated with the Goswami, Gaurachand Goswami, and then an arrangement was made that he could make those repairs and he could have, not just during his lifetime, but even after his lifetime, occupancy of those rooms, because Prabhupada had a vision. His mission was going to go beyond remaining at the Radha Damodar temple. And I forget the amount, 15 rupees per month. See if I can find it. ₹5 per month, excuse me. Forever. Now that became, some years later, like not too many years ago, became a point of contention. Oh, come on. But it's a document, and it's to be honored. So those are still Prabhupada's rooms. So you see in the upper left, that's what it looks like today. And the lower part of that is where the speaker would sit each morning, giving class to whoever would come. And on the lower left, that's Srila Prabhupada, the first year that he brought his Western disciples to see where he stayed and to introduce them to Vrindavan in general, took them around and gave wonderful classes on Nectar Devotion series, celebrated series at the Radha Damodar temple. There's Prabhupada looking at the bottom right. There are two rooms. One he did his work, like you see on the upper right, and the lower right is the sitting place where looking out the window he could see the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. I mean, it's not a well-known story, but still, it's nice. It's worth repeating. He was feeling not qualified, who am I, so forth and so on. And one fine day, Rupa Goswami came before him, encouraged him. It was like a vision. I mean, like, it didn't come out of his samadhi and say, Haribol. It was a vision of Rupa Goswami coming before him and saying, do not worry, I'll be with you. Everything you'll be successful. So he was getting direct reciprocation, as was the idea to go there and to begin with, from Rupa Goswami. Most of his time, aside from shuttling back and forth and going to Delhi and other places for membership or subscribers to Back to Godhead, much of his time was in writing Srimad Bhagavatam. And the idea of writing Srimad Bhagavatam was, you'll see a photo shortly, it's just following his Guru Maharaj. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had a vision. And the vision was that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya should be taken all around the world. And the first target outside of India was England. I'll go to that. This is the book that he was, Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada was waiting for this book. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, it was authored by Professor Nishikant Sanyal, who was kind of like a ghostwriter of Bhaktisiddhanta. It's a very wonderful description of their relationship. Sometimes Sanyal would write and Bhaktisiddhanta would take credit, sometimes the other way around. They were very, very, very close. He was a disciple, but Bhaktisiddhanta wanted this book. The departure of the sannyasis to go to England was delayed because the book didn't come out of publication until after it was planned. So their departure was delayed because he wanted them to take this book to introduce to the West who was Lord Chaitanya. Sri Krishna Chaitanya is the book. Similarly, Prabhupada wanted to carry with him Srimad Bhagavatam from Nilamrita. This was his real purpose in coming here, to prepare the books he could distribute to the people of the West. Although he had as yet no means for traveling even as far as Japan, and no means for printing books as far as Japan has to do with the light of the Bhagavat, and you'll see shortly. It was an event in Japan that he didn't go to because he didn't have the airfare to go to Japan. He had not come to Vrindavan to die and return to Godhead. Rather, he had come because it was the ideal place to gain spiritual strength for his main life's work. And right in the courtyard of Radha Damodar, very, very special place, a place of Jiva Goswami, and in the back courtyard, Rupa Goswami's Bhajan Kutir and Samadhi. The very first book that Prabhupada did write was in 1960, is it during the time when space travel was becoming a big deal, and Prabhupada knew about it, and so he wrote a book about space travel, but he called it Easy Journey to Other Planets. And gave a Vedic perspective on contemporary events. Let's see how long it lasts. So here's the schedule that Prabhupada kept. At 1 a.m., when no one else was up and it was very quiet, Mataji, do the needful, please. He's a nice boy. Thank you. At 1 a.m., when no one else was up and it was very quiet, Bhaktivedanta Swami would wake and begin writing. Since electric failures were not uncommon in Vrindavan, he would often work by lantern light. Labor of love, 1 o'clock in the morning, regularly. The first of this is showing the covers of the Srimad Bhagavatam publications. In 62, yay, the first volume of Canto 1, Part 1 was printed. In 63, the second volume of Canto 1, Part 2 was printed. And in 64, what year did he travel to America? 65. And then he reached in 66. So he had, following the standard, the model, the example of his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta, he now had these 3 books. And while this was going on, lo and behold, in January of 1961, so now we're backing up a little bit, in January of 1961, one of the visits he made to Delhi, was a person he met or had a relationship with, received a pamphlet or a flyer indicating an event that was going to take place in Japan. And the event that was going to take place in Japan was an event called Congress for the Cultivation of Human Spirit, whatever that means. And here's my understanding of what was going on. During World War II and thereafter, everyone locked the doors. There were walls up, visas weren't allowed, everyone was being protective and isolationist. However, there were some places where persons were forward thinking and wanted to, the pendulum started to swing in a different direction. And the forward thinking people wanted, let's get together and love one another kind of a message. Going away from the other side of the pendulum swing, the after war recovery, going forward. So there were some forward thinking people like that. And one of them was organizing an event in Japan. And the event in Japan was an invitation to persons to come. This was January that he received the invitation, and the event was in May. January, February, March, April, May, 5 months max, maybe 4. So on the map, in green there's subcontinent of India, and over there is Japan, and Bhaktisiddhanta had told him to go to the west. But 1961, here comes this possible opportunity to go to a conference of forward-thinking people in Tokyo. So he thought, why not? Present Srimad Bhagavatam, which is what his heart was into. Remember, he's translating first canto Bhagavatam and wanting to go through the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. That was his heart. And here's this invitation. So he wrote a letter to the organizer. He had an idea. We'll see, he puts in writing what his idea is. His idea was that Eastern Asia people have a tendency, a liking, a penchant for understanding lessons of life through nature. It's true. And so he thought a real nice approach to this event would be to take Canto 10 chapter 20 of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is just about scenes of nature, the rainy season and the autumn season. So chapter 20, interestingly, comes after chapter 19. And chapter 19 is the summer. And it's the cowherd boys with Krishna, what they would do in the summertime, this and that, playful. And then comes the rainy season. So they don't do too much because it's the rainy season. So there's lots of description about the nature of rainy season. So Prabhupada's idea was, and then after rainy season, the autumn season. So focusing on scenes of nature introduced the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's know thy audience. Public speakers need to know their audience. And he hadn't been there before, but he had an idea. And this was his idea. So in January, Prabhupada wrote a letter to the organizer. And here's his letter. This letter was found later in a trunk, along with the manuscript that never got published during Prabhupada's lifetime. Here's the letter to the organizer. I wish to impress the public delegates who would internationally join the conference for culture and human spirit in Japan about the necessity of an international movement. So now, picture in your mind Prabhupada in that little room, the Vangsi Gopal temple, thinking about making a plan for having an international movement. The necessity, not just notional. Towards this unifying purpose, this is Leelamrita, not Prabhupada. You want me to get it closer? From Leelamrita. Towards this unifying purpose, Prabhupada's vision was that the cooperation of all enlightened people of the world would be channeled, although there was no international movement at that stage. So his letter continues, kindly therefore listen to the words. Do the needful immediately and give me a chance to speak to the enlightened people of the world. The message of human culture from the Vedic literature, I am sure that such news will change the angle of vision of the world's activities. Think of the room. One man who had nothing, wanting to change the angle of vision of the world's activities. Prabhupada never thought small. He couldn't. He was like his spiritual master and like Rupa Goswami, who never thought small. They always thought broad. And sure enough, within a short period of time, he got an invitation letter sufficient to get a visa and a passport, which he didn't have. So a nice letter. It's basically the letter, and I can read the letter. It says, thanks for your request. We'll take care of your boarding and lodging, and you're going to have to take care of your transportation. So with that invitation letter, remember it's now like probably February, March, April, May. So Prabhupada started writing assiduously. And there's a close-up of the first cover, or one of the covers. And he composed a 20,000-word manuscript. Some of you sometimes write Vyasa Puja offerings, right? How long did it take you? 20,000 word. And it's his entry into the world stage with the enlightened people, forward-thinking people. He wants to change the direction of the thoughtful people of the whole world. And that's the literature he was composing. And along with the literature, so what he did was he took not exactly translations of the verses from chapter 20, he paraphrased them or some of them together in language that he felt was suitable for the audience, giving a picture of nature. And then in his commentary, he gave lessons from Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's masterful. How you weave clouds in the sky with Varnashram. Or, the frogs that when they make their sound, it's like, the materialistic people that are misleading the population of the world, and the sages, and because in Japan, in the Far East, there's respect for elders and holy men or wise men, and so the Varnashram system, the role of saintly people, even got into the gopis. He even got into Vedic cosmology, just from scenes of nature. I'll tell you, because I've made this present. I went through the whole book. Part of the reason for saying this, choosing this topic, is because it's nice, and I have a lot of feeling for it. But when you read the book, I've met people in the course of speaking about this. I read the book, or it's sitting on my shelf, and I never read it. But now I want to go back and read it again because it's masterful. Srimad Bhagavatam is 18,000 verses, and this is 50. And Prabhupada's telling the Bhagavatam story in 50 verses. It's actually 48, I think. So in addition, as he's going along writing, he's writing a letter to the organizer asking the organizer to make a display. And what's going to go on the display is the 50 illustrations. And so Prabhupada gave a detailed description, which is found in the trunk, along with the invitation letter and the manuscript that never got published. Prabhupada's words of what he wanted the organizer to do: find an artist that had traditional Oriental art style, and here's what he wanted to be in those 50 paintings. And not only he wanted him to do that, he wanted him to print the book and make big blow-ups that they could have when they come into the conference. They could see the printing, the color plates would go into the book. He wasn't a small thinking person. So none of that happened. There was obstacles. He didn't have money. He had a vision. They would take care of his accommodation, but he didn't have airfare. So what did he do? He went to people that had the means. And the answer, in short, was no. I mean, probably a polite no, but no. His message was, I'm a renounced person representing our culture, going to the people that he had met and people that he hadn't met. Please make all arrangements so that I can travel in this way. So it's like a polite way of asking for a donation for his airfare. And he went to government officers like the Ministry for Scientific Research and Cultural Affairs. He went to the Vice President of India, Dr. Radhakrishnan. Door was closed. Potential donors in Bombay and Delhi, because he had gone, and there are references from those people and nothing. Japanese gentlemen organizing the event, nothing. Didn't have the money, the airfare to go, or to print the book, or to make the artwork. And so it sat in a trunk. But he wasn't discouraged. This is one thing we learn about our founder Acharya. Even when there wasn't a result, he was not discouraged. Look at that image. It's firm resolution in his face. So somehow the articles from his Light of the Bhagavad made their way into the Aurobindo Ashram publication, entitled Lecture Meant to be Delivered at the International Congress in Japan, 1961. "23 years later," this is after Prabhupada's, so add 61 plus 23. What's the number? It's after his departure. They found a trunk. And in the trunk, there are many interesting things. But one of them was the manuscript, the letter to the organizer, the description of the paintings, the letter back from the organizer so he could get a visa and a passport. And the devotees, I'll say one other thing that I know was in that trunk. One of the things that Prabhupada had been invited to do was at the time of the Gandhi Memorial, because in his youth, Prabhupada was an ardent Gandhi follower, right? And so, and his memorial, he was asked to give a speech. So he not only gave a speech, but conventionally when you give a speech, you write a paper. And you summarize the paper, but the paper is circulated to say the larger message. And in that paper that Prabhupada wrote, he said, the way to honor a great personality, think about us wanting to honor Srila Prabhupada, but the way to honor a great personality is not to name a street after the person, or name a building after the person, or make a statue of the person, which are three common things that are done, but to establish a community where the ideals that were held by that person are lived. Because Gandhi was a great believer and follower of Bhagavad Gita, that place should be called Gita Nagari. Now, that was found in a trunk later. But when Prabhupada first visited what was then called the New York Farm, he gave it a name, Gita Nagari. He didn't say, I wrote about this. Go find it in the trunk. It was just found later. So the devotees in Gita Nagari have taken it. That's our Gita Nagari prophecy. That's what they call it. And they tried to follow it. Of course, it was very specific of what Prabhupada envisioned in such a place. But it's a way to honor a great person. So what happened when they found this manuscript in the trunk in 1984, they gave the manuscript to the man that could get impossible done, Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Because at that time, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was GBC of China, and he was making his residence in Hong Kong because foreign non-Chinese residents can live in Hong Kong, and so that's where he was based. And he did the needful. The first book was a large size. Maybe you've seen that's been reproduced in the West, but it was in Chinese. The size of the book was 9 inches by 12 inches, and 48 full color paintings made by this lady here who was a celebrity, or a well-known artist in mainland China. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was the art director. She was the artist, and Prabhupada's design for what he wanted in those paintings was the plan, the blueprint. And over a course of nearly a year, Giridhari Swami said it took about 11 months. She would come once a month, and he would critique her work. And anybody that's interacted with Tamal Krishna Maharaj knows he's a tough cookie to interact with. He would be very, very particular about what he wanted, and to follow what Prabhupada wanted. So in the course of time, there was 48 paintings, and it became established in this book in Chinese, first published in Chinese. And there's other covers, there's multiple other covers. Here's another one of the other covers. And just a little sharing, I'm going to end shortly. I saw this in Dandabas.com, no. Where was it? Yeah, Iskcon News. That in Brazil, in Portuguese, in 2017, they had a display in a mall, a shopping center. And in the shopping center, they had all these, exactly what Prabhupada envisioned, blow-ups of all the artwork, not all the artwork, but many of the paintings displayed like this, and then copies of the book, and encouraging people to understand the message of the book, and of course, along with this book, other books, other Prabhupada's books. Here's the sign in Portuguese, Light of the Bhagavata. And because I've been doing this, I came to know from Hanumat Preshik Swami that he's doing the same thing in Spanish-speaking places, particularly in Peru and Chile. He made a movie. I haven't seen the movie. He calls it a bilingual movie. And he's presented it 53 times in prestigious places in South America. You see some of the names. And look at the photograph behind him. What do you see? Painting from Light of the Bhagavad. So he wants to have a conversation with me. How can we promote this in the West? Now, there was a time when simply by presenting an idea to expand literature distribution and preaching Krishna consciousness, just putting an idea out there in the ether, people would jump on it. So Prabhu's, I'm putting the idea out in the ether. That find a way, this is a way to increase the distribution of Prabhupada's books in general, but specifically this book is innocuous. It's scenes of nature. Now, the content is weighty, but the art is very beautiful and culturally, nice, very pleasing, the artwork. And find a way to have the displays made and find places where the displays can be presented. And then you can speak about the message of Light of the Bhagavad and who is Prabhupada and all the other rest of his books. It's like put your foot inside the door, and next thing you're in the room. You follow? And this way, the legacy of our founder Acharya continues on, and it doesn't have to wait. It can happen later. It doesn't have to wait. Prabhupada's words: "I shall never die. I shall live forever in my books." And going back to what he envisioned, changing the course of human world history through his literature and through his propagating his message. The more you distribute books, history will change. Some of you know, during Prabhupada's youth, there was a very strong effort made in West Bengal to bring communism into West Bengal. And what was the method? Literature distribution. So Prabhupada saw it. He witnessed it. He experienced it. And he took that principle, and that's the principle that he applied for the Hare Krishna movement. And it's still going on. There are different ways and through different media, but it's to change the history of the world. In his case, the vision was his history of West Bengal, or at least the mindset of people in West Bengal. But Prabhupada wanted the world to be part of this. So think about it. Is there a way to increase, a creative way to increase book distribution? Put your foot in the door and get some appreciation for this nice book. So when I started getting into this, I asked in China, because I go to China, do you have that book in print? No. Can you make a special print? Yes. They made a special print run, and within 36 hours it was sold out, because I was like, rah, 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 and so it was sold out. I told Suvas, hey, Suvas. So he reprinted it. It's in the LA warehouse. I don't know how many copies, but the copies are available. The ones that are, as far as I know, the ones that are available are thin paperback books, but they have been printed. Someone gave me a gift copy that came from online. It's a hardcover and with full color. So anyway, I'm doing a rah-rah about promoting the book because it's a way that history can change in a way that's innocuous. I mean, very sweet and very simple. You'll see when you see the book. Last slide. Although he wanted to go to Japan even before coming to the USA, and although he wrote the book Light of the Bhagavad, especially to preach the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam in Japan, Krishna had a different plan for Srila Prabhupada, sending him first to the USA. When Krishna has a plan, that's what you do. But he also had a plan that the course of the mindset of leading people in the world would change by hearing the light of the Bhagavad, hearing the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. He gave his life for that. Of course, many other literatures, but especially Srimad Bhagavatam, and literatures in keeping with Srimad Bhagavatam. So let's see if there's some discussion. Srila Prabhupada ki? Yeah. Yes.
Maharaj, you mentioned that the book had been published in China. Is it published in Japan? Does it have any influence there?
I don't know if the book was published in Japan. Most likely it was published in Japan. But I could find out, but most likely, because that was his intention, so most likely it happened. But the first printing was the man who could get impossible done. So most likely, yes. I mean, it was printed in Portuguese and German and Spanish, and most likely in Japanese too. You can write to Kavi Chandramarj and ask him. He'll know. Okay. You want the microphone?